Coming up next on the Jeff Crilley Show, we're going to talk about a very difficult subject that isn't discussed in most homes. We're going to talk about suicide. We'll be talking to a leading national expert. She knows something about this. She lost both of her parents to suicide. You'll hear her journey next.
Many are predicting that the worst is yet to come, which is unfortunate, said one person here. Until now, they've enjoyed the reputation of being the nation's icebox.
Watched a burglar in his home this morning by webcam.
As a journalist of over 25 years, stories are what make my world turn.
Reporting live from the Dallas newsroom tonight, Jeff Crilley, Fox 4 News.
But in 2008, I took the jump from my familiar life and started a PR firm from my home.
We're talking about anyone with a camcorder like the one I'm using becomes a television network.
We started slowly growing the company, and we now have over 100 clients, and we've branched into the world of live digital broadcasting. I now own 8 different TV studios and have a huge team, and the stories that I now get to share are sometimes the most important of my life. Life has a funny way of coming around full circle. This is the Jeff Crilley Show.
Well, it's been like this for generations. Suicide is almost a taboo subject in this country, and it doesn't need to be, because depression can unfortunately lead to suicide unless you're having those tough conversations inside families. Many parents aren't picking up on warning signs. To talk about that today, Sherry Janes, she's the CEO and head of a wonderful nonprofit called 2020 Lives Changed. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you so much, Jeff. It is a pleasure to be here. I'm so excited.
Well, you have a way of talking about suicide where you can get serious, but it doesn't have to be a grim topic. Right. When you go out and do a lot of keynote speaking, don't you?
I do. Actually, I use humor, and it's interesting when I talk to an organization. I'm like, I want to come and talk to your teams about mental wealth, and it's going to be funny. And they're like, what? Why would that be funny? Well, humor is one of the key tools that we use day to day to deal with stress and anxiety and depression. And if we can't have that conversation on stage, 3,500 people in a room, then we can't do that when we're alone and we're stressed. And so we have very, very serious conversations, but we do it with a smile. We do it with the hope that we will change lives a little bit at a time, every day, by one heart-to-heart conversation. So.
And it is an important topic because even the news, I was in the news for 25 years, and we kind of had a rule: we don't cover suicides. We don't want to glamorize suicide. And so the only time you hear about it is like, unfortunately, we had the former Miss USA jump to her death in New York a couple of weeks ago. The media needs to wake up and tell these stories.
Agreed. Well, and I want to stress more than anything that the thing that gives suicide its power is silence. If you're afraid to talk about how you're feeling, if you're afraid to discuss that you're stressed, that's where suicide, that's where it wins every time. One of the conversations we had earlier today with one of your staff is that sometimes we're guilty of that as parents. We have conversations with our children like, you have no reason to be upset. You live in this great home. You've got nice things. You have all these wonderful things. Why are you sad? And what we do is ill-equip our children to understand that there's a physiological feeling. There is something that's happening. I am sad. I don't know why I'm sad, but my mom and dad told me I shouldn't be, so maybe I'm broken. And so a lot of the things that we do as parents, that our parents did with us and their parents, we thought it was a good thing, but sometimes we are actually laying the groundwork for that despair. And so what our organization does is the opposite. We talk about, you're going to have feelings, feel them. Express them, learn to articulate them so that people around you can support you before you get to that crisis moment.
You're an absolutely compelling speaker. We've got some video of you speaking to a group. What kind of groups do you enjoy speaking to the most these days?
So I missed this. This was actually Amazon Prime Video Speak Up, and so it was a live studio audience. I had the opportunity to share the story about my father's suicide and the impact that it had on me. But it was a hopeful story because I talked about all the lives that I touched then and continue to touch after I understood my why. Why was I so passionate about teaching young people about their emotions and leadership? It was because of how I grew up. And so I love being in a room where I can feel the energy of the people that I'm talking to, when I can see their smiles, when you see that moment of, I do that. or I felt that, right? And so I really appreciate, and it doesn't matter, schools, I've been in universities, I've been in Frisco ISD, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade classrooms, churches. If there are humans involved, I love being there. So.
And you were telling me before we went on, you lost not only your father, but then you lost your mother.
Yes.
And it wasn't a story that you told very often.
I didn't. I had the opportunity in the last 30 years to work for some amazing organizations, AT&T, 7-Eleven Corporate. I've had some great leadership roles. I've traveled and I've spoken about all of these great things. I never talked about my past because I was ashamed. There's such a stigma around, suicide and mental health. And well, if her parents died by suicide, then what's wrong with her? And is something going to happen? So I had spoken on all these stages, and I felt almost as a fraud because people didn't know my true story. And I had the opportunity to meet Simon Sinek, and he's like, "You seem to be very passionate about this next generation of leaders. Why?" And I'm like, "Well, because I have children in 2 different generations." So here's a story. You didn't know this, but my 2 children are 32 and 14. I have a little bit of space between my kids. So I'm like, that's why I'm so passionate about young people. I've got kids in 2 different generations. And he said, "That's not your why." And I was like, "You don't know me." "What do you mean?" He's like, "That's not your why." I started therapy, and my therapist said, "Tell me about your childhood." And I had no memory of it. I had blocked it out, and that's what needed to happen to keep myself safe. But over the years, in my therapy journey, we have uncovered the story of what happened to my father, what happened to my mother, the impact that it had on me, right? God has used that tragedy and that trauma to help me coach and mentor thousands of people. And they didn't know my why. It didn't matter. But now that I know my why, I can use it as a purpose. I know my purpose. I went through those struggles so that I can tell you that I know what it feels like when you want to give up. I know what it feels like when you think it's just insurmountable, but I also know that there is a plan, and that his plan is always better than ours. And if we can just be obedient in that moment, the phoenix will rise. And
so in doing show prep, I went out to YouTube and I found this amazing video. This is kind of a "This Is Your Life," Sherry James. Let's go ahead and roll that now.
My name is Sherry James. Coming in December, we'll have After the Suicide, Leading with Love and Light, which is my labor of love. It's a story about how I've chosen to give my life to others. The main message is that it's okay to talk about mental health. It's okay to be depressed. It's okay to have anxiety. These things are normal in today's society, and you should always have someone to talk to. Unfortunately, it's a stigma, but what happens is that people still struggle. They struggle alone, even though they're surrounded by people and hundreds of fans and followers, but no one really knows the true struggle. So that's the message, is that someone is listening, someone does care, and don't be afraid to talk about it. There's plenty of platforms and resources that are available, and it doesn't have to be something that you're ashamed of. So that's the thing that I really, really want to make sure that I talk about, just not just in the book, but even in all of the work that I do.
I am light.
Date is going to be December 19th, 2019. That date is very important to me. On that day, I will have lived to be older than my mom. My mom died at 47, and that day is my 48th birthday. I was a victim. My dad committed suicide when I was very young. My mother struggled as a result of that, and I was surrounded by people who loved me and took care of me, and they took me under their wings. And so I've been doing that for most of my life, and I never really took time to figure out why. So this book is dedicated to that. Tonight is kind of the kickoff to celebrate that labor of love and start, promoting it on a night as important as this.
I am light, yeah.
Michelle Obama is like my hero. So she is the consummate lady. She's very smart, of course. She has it all. She's got the education, she's got the background, but she also has been a very good sponsor for just standing up for what you believe in. Never have I been so excited to leave my favorite comfortable space and go see someone like Michelle Obama to re-motivate me and to give me that excitement and that energy that I need to kick this book off. So I'm very grateful to her. I'm very thankful. Fingers crossed I get to actually meet her and give her a book card so that she can support our book. She's kind of what I aspire to be. So I love being able to spend time in the presence of someone who's a hero. I actually feel like Michelle Obama was talking to me specifically. She talked about how important it is to do this work with the next generation. She talked about how important it was to have conversations with people that don't look like you, who are younger than you from a different background. It was literally my story coming out of her mouth. So I'm so inspired. I feel like I absolutely needed to be here today. I needed to hear her story. I needed to be able to tell my story. So awesome. I'm super excited. It was everything. I think my favorite quote from tonight, she said, "It's hard to hate up close. If you know someone that's different than you, if you know someone from a different background." She talked about mental health and how important that was. She talked about women, of course, having a voice and a seat at the table. So I'm excited about that. So hopefully this is a great start to an awesome book launch.
I am light.
My name is Sherry James, and I hope that this begins a legacy of being able to talk about things that are uncomfortable. So definitely this is for my daughter Tiffany and for my son Miles. I want to say that I'm super proud of both of my children. I hope that they'll see this and understand that they can continue to be an advocate and a catalyst for change.
All right, Sherry, what was it like meeting Michelle Obama?
I can't even explain it. The words are, I have no words. She was the most human I've ever met. I think I had this expectation of her just being, untouchable, and she was so warm and welcoming and just, human. I don't know another word. She was very inspirational. A lot of the work that I'm doing now was catapulted from that evening and that very intimate conversation, talking about heart to heart what's important. So she's amazing.
Well, you talk a great deal about being proactive and reactive. Mm-hmm. So what do you mean by that?
A lot of organizations now, especially with mental illness being in the news as much as it is, people are focused on that crisis hotline. What do you do in that moment when you feel like you're ready to give up? What we do is more proactive. So we go into, for example, K through 12. We go to schools and we teach children how to identify their emotions, how to feel their feelings, how to articulate them. As humans, we will have emotions and feelings, and it's normal. It's a good thing. But if we can teach our children early enough how to handle those emotions, then hopefully we can lessen the number of calls that go into those crisis hotlines. So we do the same thing in organizations where we're talking to executive leaders, and when you're in the middle of strategic planning for the year and you want to pull your eyeballs out, right? What do? You get a frozen tangerine and you hold it and you focus on the coldness of that. And so things like that. That's that proactive. And then there are people who have gone through traumatic situations and they've got to now go back to the normalcy of life, losing a loved one or a job change or things like that. How do you go back into your day-to-day utilizing these same kind of coping mechanisms, so that transition after the fact of something traumatic happening, right? And so those are the two areas where people aren't talking.
Yes.
People are only focused on that in the moment, but real life, we need that help from day one till day 121. Right?
Absolutely, and you speak a lot to the C-suite and leaders, and sometimes leaders have to put on this suit of armor that I can't show weakness. I can't tell my team that I'm dealing with some stuff. Why is it so important for leaders to get help?
Well, so the thing is, any good leader, Simon Sinek, which I mention often, he has a book called Leaders Eat Last, right? And it talks about, you want to make sure that your team is well, that they have the tools that they need, that servant leadership mentality. But the same thing applies when it comes to mental health and mental wellness. If I'm not exhibiting mental wealth, and if I'm not doing things that are contributing to my mental bank, and I'm not, being careful of things that are withdrawing from my mental bank, then my teams won't do that either. Nor will their teams, nor will their customers or our vendors. So if we truly are leaders, if we truly want to lead from the back, then we have to have those conversations. And there's a respect that exists when you know that your leader is saying, "Excuse me, I have to leave for my therapy session." Then there's oh, it's okay. We can be human here. That's okay. So it's leading by example.
Okay, we only have about a minute left, so talk to the viewer about how do you know when you need help, and how do you have the courage to just say, I'm in trouble?
So I think the bigger issue is that we all need help. We all need help every single day. So one of the things that the pandemic has taught each of us is that we need each other. We need to stay connected, and not just via social media, but like hand holding and a conversation. I probably do more FaceTime calls than most people now after the pandemic, because I want to look into the eyes of those that I care about. How are you really, right? And so the work that we do isn't just about suicide prevention in that moment. It's about day-to-day coping skills. It's about how do I deal with the stresses of today, the traffic, the homework, the upcoming track meet, whatever those things are. We will deal with stressors, but I love to talk to people and teach them on how to find healthy ways to deal with that in that moment, to become stronger leaders, stronger parents, children, whatever they've been chosen by God to be. Using your words to express your emotions is a superpower, and I'm excited to help people to do that.
Wow. Well, thank you for using your superpowers for the good of the planet. We're going to end with a couple of websites. First, her nonprofit, which is 2020liveschange.org, and then her for-profit is phoenixspeaksinc.com. phoenixspeaksinc.com. Sherry James, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you so much, Jeff.
You bet.
Thank you.
That's it for now. We'll see you next time.